Now, one of the issues, of course, that has ruined the looming winter for us is the effect of this pandemic on sport, both locally and globally, in an Olympics year. The Olympics, we all knew, looked very much in peril. The Australian Olympic Committee got out ahead of the game and said there's no way we can put a team together. The next day, Tokyo and the Olympic officials have admitted that the Games are suspended. They hope to have them next year. So I'm joined now by the Australian Olympic Committee's Matt Carroll. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. A terrible situation to have the Olympics suspended, but they'll be on. We wait a year, back in Tokyo, presumably late July, August next year, they'll be on.
Exactly, Chris. The president of the International Olympic Committee said last week that they didn't want to cancel the Olympics. That's the most important thing. All those athletes, over 10,000 athletes from around the world, have been working hard over the last 4 years, and obviously not only that, their family and friends and the whole group that goes into making the Olympics a great sporting event. So a postponement was the right decision, and as you just said, we will be there in Tokyo in 2021.
Now, you obviously had the welfare and certainty of Australian athletes firmly in mind in recent days and weeks. You wanted to give them some clarity, and that's why you decided in the current situation you couldn't put a team together. Just tell us about the anxiety you were getting from athletes across a range of sports, and they would have been in different parts of the world in recent months. It must have been very unsettling for them trying to work out what their training regime and schedule might be.
Well, that was right. And last week, we spoke with the athletes. We got them. The athletes wanted to go to the Games, as I just said. They'd worked really hard to get there, and we were getting, I suppose, the advice from the International Olympic Committee. We were taking advice from World Health last week that was good. But over the weekend, changing the regulations here in Australia, as the Health Minister just outlined, for keeping Australians safe and healthy, applies to our athletes as well. And of course, their ability to train and prepare got restricted. As we know, the international borders were closing, state borders were closing. So the Australian Olympic Committee had to make the decision that we just could not assemble the team. We couldn't do it to the athletes. We needed to give them clarity. So they got that on Monday from ourselves, and of course they got that in the early hours this morning from the International Olympic Committee. And now they have a goal to aim for next year. It's going to be a hard year, the rest of this year, for Australians, for the world. So I think next year's Tokyo Olympics will be an opportunity for the world to come together and to celebrate.
Well, it's absolutely going to be a hard year for them. Like all the rest of us, they're going to have to get through this with the health and economic uncertainties and family worries and all of that. But what about their actual sporting endeavours? What about if I've swum out of my skin and qualified for the Olympics this time around? Do I have to re-qualify now that it's going to be held a year later, or are you going to accept that the team is as named this year?
Well, the sports that have qualified through the quota system with the International Olympic Committee and the international federations, those qualifications will hold. So, a good example is the Matildas. The Matildas have qualified; they don't have to go through any qualification process again. Any athlete that has qualified as an individual, obviously they're in the team as well. The only ones to come, and I think it's only about 20-odd% of our team sports that are yet to finish their qualification process because of the disruption caused by COVID-19. This actually gives those sports and athletes some time now for that qualification system to be put in either late this year or early next year. So we still expect to take one of the largest teams ever to an away games.
So that's great news for all the athletes. Anybody who's qualified is still qualified. But what about the additional year? There might be athletes who mature a bit or get over an injury. Are you able to add to the team if you choose to do so over the next year?
Oh, look, the Australian Olympic Committee, once a sport nominates an athlete and we select them, we don't deselect. This is Thomas Barker, in announcing it last night, said, this is the 2020 Olympics. They're just going to be in 2021. So there's not going to be a change to the name. It's still Tokyo 2020. It's just going to be in 21. And then 3 years later, very close, there'll be Paris. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for up-and-coming athletes for Paris 2024.
Matt, just finally, financially, what sort of a blow is this? How much uncertainty has this created, not just for your own organisation, but for all the member sports and some of the athletes, of course, having to go through another year of this before payday, if you like, of the games themselves?
Well, there's not much for payday for the athletes, but obviously we were going to expend dollars this year. We're not going to spend now. We'll spend them next year. Our sponsors are with us and supporting us, as they are the International Olympic Committee. I've already spoken to our partners, and we'll roll their contracts over a year into 2021 through our foundation, which supports us. The AOC won't be looking for any government support in this, because we'll get the team to Tokyo. The sports themselves, yes, they'll do it tough, like a lot of businesses, because they're like a business. So we'll work with them as well. I know the government, through the Sports Commission, is looking to assist the sports as well. And most importantly, we'll work with the athletes to ensure that any of them which are out of work, the same as a lot of people obviously now out of work in this country, we'll be working with them to ensure they can start their training again once it's safe to do so, and be ready for the Games in 2021.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Absolute pleasure, Chris.
Matt Carroll there, who's the Chief Executive of the Australian Olympic Committee.